listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two codependent, overeducated nerd hosts. Is that how it goes? I don't remember. Bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, November 17th, 2023. We missed an episode last week, dear listeners. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, Andrew, but we are directly connected with it, and I guess we might be breaking an NDA. I don't know if you heard, but since we last had an episode, the SAG-AFTRA strike ended. They agreed to some terms, and apparently one of those terms was we weren't allowed to make a show, and so we gladly honored it. And I mean, I'm a little offended, but here we are.
I do love the idea that, that in all the things they're negotiating, like, well, these two dudes that make a podcast that 5 people listen to, shut that down.
Scanning bodies to use people's image after they're dead, paying a fair wage to behind the scenes and labor workers. But also there's this podcast that is a problem. They're too good. That's honestly, I mean, I might be speculating this. We're too good. They need to take a week off. And you know what? We're here to listen.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
That's a different show.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that at some point, I'm sure. But actually, this week also gave us a nice kind of time to bring to an end, in a sense, to what we actually talked about last time we were on Mike.
You mean Alan, not Mike.
Not Mike?
On Alan? We're talking about Alan, not Mike.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I'm being obnoxious.
Since we were last on Barry.
So, okay, what we're cutting to is that, Dan, you finished Alan Wake Remastered.
Mm-hmm.
I did not, but I played the original. I think I got to the end of, episode 2, and I'm like, I am tired of running from fucking shadows and shit.
You bailed at that point. Oh,
well, it's on the Epic Game Store, which I don't like loading up. Actually, it's a weird thing on my computer where I don't know if I mentioned it last time that if Steam is open when I try to play Alan Wake, the controls get all fucked up.
Wow. So
I have to actually close Steam because of like the way Steam maps the controller or something. It's really bizarre, and it really just feels like. I mean, it may be that Steam is the monster here, but boy, oh boy, does it just feel like Epic has got some shit, So anyway, I've not played it that much, but I did play it back in the late aughts, I think.
Right, and you've played the sort of the pseudo sequel, the half sequel,
American Nightmare, yeah,
and have some sort of like side-eye familiarity with Alan Wake 2 as your partner has been playing it. Finished it, from what I heard.
Yes,
right?
Finished it. Well, as it currently stands, because there's DLC and whatnot.
And probably still some bugs to patch out. But we're not going to get into Alan Wake 2 too much, just because it is so recent and all that stuff. But I wanted to come back to this game because, as we were talking about it last time, obviously you had the knowledge of kind of how it wraps up and especially kind of what they do with the story in that pseudo sequel. And now that I finished, we have a bit more ground to cover, or at least to talk about. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. I was last time I could probably find the clip here somewhere. It's nice to play a schlub, and with everything that entails in terms of being awkward, being scared, and being at a disadvantage. And I really appreciate about this game. Although, again, we could check in next week and see how I'm doing. And you were like, buddy, we better slow your roll. And yeah, you were right. You were right. The combat in this game is bad. It's very bad. Especially in those early chapters. I feel like it eased up a little bit once you got towards the end, because by some random metric, I don't know what, I guess just narrative progression, like you get a larger life bar. They give you more weapons up front, more ammo up front. So I didn't, and maybe just the hashtag getting good also kind of was coming into play. Mm-hmm. So out of the 6 chapters, I felt like chapters 2, 3, and 4 are like the meatiest part of the I don't like playing this game morass that I was working my way through. But the last couple chapters I actually found quite fun. especially as things got super bonkers. But yeah, I wanted to start with that because even though I don't necessarily disagree with what I was saying, like there's something about the clunkiness of the combat that I do enjoy, at least respect, and kind of as a design decision. Man, the game does not do the player any favors to kind of work with that. It's just kind of like, here's what you got, get through it, right? And what I mean by that is the character moves fairly slowly. He's fairly weak in terms of how much damage he can take, but it's hampered by bad camera control, bad camera placement, and seemingly kind of random enemy generation that just has them popping out of nowhere all the time. So it just feels like you're overwhelmed until you figure out the pattern. And one part of the pattern that I figured out, or maybe, I don't know if I figured it out or if it's just more in play with later chapters, which is like, they don't really expect you necessarily to dispatch all the enemies in this region. They expect you to keep running.
Right.
Which is a problem because his running is terrible as well. At specific points, it's a very frustrating game, but I will say the writing and the narrative aspects did keep pushing me to keep going forward. So it was frustrating in the moment to the point where I scared my dog because I was yelling at the TV so much. But getting past that, I'm like, and getting to the end of a chapter, I'm like, whew, that was a time, wasn't it? and the frustration, the anger I felt kind of dissipated fairly quickly. Which, is that a strength of the game, or is that just me coming up with excuses? I'm not sure yet.
Right. Because this reminds me of my experience with other games like, Silent Hill, notoriously, the original Silent Hill was like, the controls were shitty, the whatever, like it was, but like you justify, a lot of people justify by the end because like, wow, but that was part of the experience. Like, this guy doesn't know how to fight. Like, yeah, sure, buddy. That's what it is.
Right.
Except that usually by the end, most people are like, but that was a good game.
I think we talked about this last time where it's like, it felt like they were trying to walk a line of like being an action game and being a survival horror narrative driven game. And I think for me, and this might just be my age at this point, I would have just preferred them to, the combat, quote unquote, would have just been the flashlight, right? And like managing battery levels. I think I did say this last time. It's like, it seems really strange for a fiction writer to all of a sudden be walking around with a hunting rifle. Right. Like it's a bit much, or more specifically, walking around with a hunting rifle and a revolver
and a flare
pistol
gun
and a shotgun and a flare gun and flashbangs and not dynamite, but flares.
Yeah, 10 road flares. And
it stretches the limits of not believability because it's all unbelievable, but it's definitely kind of stretches the limits of taste, I guess. And I think they could have had a much more moody and sort of a cohesive mechanic if they just kind of leaned into just like the light as the weapon, right? Because that's the metaphor. That's the and that's technically the first quote unquote weapon you get in the game. And as you stated last time, sometimes they don't give you a flashlight right away, and you have to kind of manage with that by bouncing between save points, right? Which are basically street lights.
Points, yeah.
Or like getting somewhere you can hear enemies coming up and you got to start the stupid generator with a really bad QuickTime mechanic. But at least it gets the light going and you're safe for now. And you can heal up and whatever. And again, not to armchair game design here, but especially with the narrative that surrounds it, that would have been, it felt like, and again, understanding this is a 13-year-old game, that felt like it would have been a more compelling mechanic to make the actual narrative and the combat gel a bit more. It's funny because I walk away from the game going, I'm glad I finally played Alan Wake. I thought it was really unique, despite being a 13-year-old game. But I also stepped away from going like, I'm kind of glad I don't ever have to play that again, which made me a little sad.
Yeah, for me, trying to play it again, like I stopped, and I'll probably pick it back up. It was, there were frustrations in it. Like more and more, I felt like maybe I'll just read the summary of,
watch like YouTube collection of this cutscenes. Like that's all you need.
But but one thing I will say is a game, I think you don't see it in Alan Wake. In fact, I think it doesn't start until their next game, Alan Wake American Nightmare. But it's now very much, I think, the integration of live action with computer models. Like the idea that that all the characters in Alan Wake are modeled after like real actors,
Mostly Finnish actors, yeah.
right? I don't think the actors ever play like live action parts in the first Alan Wake, but I don't remember. And I obviously
there are times when you come across TVs, and what pops up on TV can be one of a couple things. There's like, was it Night Springs? Is like their scary door. That's why it's not scary door. That's Futurama.
Prepare to enter the scary door.
But then there's also a couple scenes where it's Alan Wake in that cabin on the island, and he's walking around and typing and looking at the camera and stuff like that. And that is live action.
Oh, okay. And that may have been because with American Nightmare, they start to do it more where you actually have videos on TVs where you see Scratch doing things like basically taunting you with murders and stuff. And then, of course, Quantum Break went full hard into let's just do full things. But actually, like I think from that point on, that becomes an integrated part of the way they do their games. And I it's weird because I think back to the 90s with FMV games and how back then it was always, often very janky where it'd be like, here's the clip, here's the game, here's the clip, here's the game. And here it's like, it almost gets to the point now where they really do integrate them to a way where it works.
It enhances.
Yeah. And I think that's and I'm watching clip bits of Alan Wake 2 where I was like, wow, there's a whole scene with just these two actors doing a scene, and then it's like, and then Alan Wake gets up, starts walking, and then suddenly it's the 3D model, or whatever, right? Like
that's some of the commentary I've heard about Alan Wake is that there are points in that game where it almost seems seamless, where it's hard to tell what is live action, what's not, which is kind of cool because it's not necessarily saying the graphics have gotten so good, but the integration of those things have gotten so good. And that's incredible. Like I remember the first time really being wowed with FMV was actually Final Fantasy VIII. And it was it Final Fantasy VIII? I think it was. And it was it's really bad in hindsight, but like in the background is a full motion video of like armies like fighting. And in the foreground is not the sprites, but
the janky as fuck 3D models.
Yeah, not as janky as Final Fantasy VII, but not I know, much
but
better.
It's so funny to go back to old PlayStation games and be like, wow, you had all 7 polygons.
But I definitely remember thinking like, oh, this is like seamless. This is not that they didn't look, not that they looked the same, but it didn't start getting hitchy. It was like, oh, this is cool. Like it created a more cinematic feel. Despite being non-interactive, like ostensibly it was all FMV because it was just me watching a cutscene ultimately.
Right. And I actually I like that Remedy does this. I think it is like they're doing the kind of thing that, probably people in the 90s, that's what they thought it would be. Right.
Right.
Where they were trying to get to. And not that, like I like the idea that you have the actors doing the acting and stuff where you don't have to worry as much about the nuances of did you capture their face. Like with the 3D balls and stuff. But then for the game, you're like, okay, now we can go to the model so we don't have to have Mortal Kombat style or pre-recorded, whatever,
Right. What's even more confusing is not confusing. I think it's interesting more than anything else. But like there is that distinction between the face actor, for lack of a better word, and then the voice actor, at least the American voice actor or English voice actor. Because in Control, I believe that the person that does the English voice acting plays an on-screen character, FMV character in Control. And in Alan Wake 2, I've heard this, Sam Lake, the president, the CEO of Remedy,
right?
He he is the face actor of a main character in Alan Wake 2. It's just this incestuous Celtic knot of integration between actors and voice actors and developers.
Oh, sure.
And that seems to be, but that's also the stories that Remedy is telling.
But it's also, the one thing to be clear, and I think the other thing that's very interesting is that, they made Alan Wake, they made Quantum Break, they made Control, and then they made Alan Wake 2. And in all sincerity, they're basically all connected loosely.
Right.
Quantum Break is like the idea that there are connections. Like they made references in Quantum Break to the other games. In fact, there's a character in Alan Wake 2 that a lot of people have said, "Oh, is that this guy from Quantum Break?" because they have similar names, and although the actors are different, they're similar enough because the original actor died. It's to have your own Videogamatic Universe.
Right.
But for games that don't feel like they should have been connected at all.
Right. And to do it so subtly, right? Like that's the thing. It first felt like, oh, Remedy's trying to do this thing again. And then when it actually starts clicking and they have enough games under their belt, you're like, oh, like they're doing this thing again and it's connected. Is pretty cool. I remember being really impressed with the control, even though I didn't get too far in it because I actually, ironically, or maybe not ironically, actually coincidentally and maybe expectedly in hindsight, I didn't find the combat very engaging or found it frustrating, despite the ideas behind it really cool. For those that don't know, like, Control is ostensibly about an unknown or shadow government organization called the FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control, who are there to monitor AWE's altered world events. And what I loved about the game, and I almost wish I could skip the combat, is just walking around the old house, as they call it, or the headquarters of the FBC, and finding all these files and basically lore dumps all over the place. And yeah, they make reference to the AWE of
Bright Falls.
Bright Falls, there we go. Making explicit reference to that, and you're like, oh, I see that. But what's funny is, like, in the world, in the games of Alan Wake, at least in that first one, like, this is like a trippy David Lynchian, what the hell's going on, Gordian knot of reality and narrative. And in Control, it's like, oh, that's an event that we have a file on, right? And it's cool to see things get recontextualized just because you're playing this universe from a different point of view.
Right.
That makes it's actually kind of compelling and makes me want to maybe give Control another shot, because I did enjoy Alan Wake, and I'm kind of picking up what they're putting down in terms of this very strange world, especially, and I guess spoiler alert from here on out for Alan Wake 1, especially because of that ending.
Well, and to be clear, right, Control has the DLC that is the Alan Wake DLC. Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, Alan Wake 2 features the FBC pretty, like they're connected. Like, the connection to Control and Alan Wake is not subtle. It is... No. They mashed these two games into each other for Alan Wake 2.
Not to go back to what I mentioned earlier, where I had sort of conflicting feelings, but when I finished the game, like, oh, I'm really glad I played it. I actually had holistically a good time playing Alan Wake. I like the characters, like the story, and the combat, like I said, by the end was kind of fun once I kind of figured out how it worked and understood the quote unquote nuances of it. But I was also like, I'm kind of glad I'm kind of done playing this, and there's. The remastered version has two, I guess were originally DLC episodes.
Right.
The writer and I forgot the name of the second one. I kind of have no interest in playing it because, one, I kind of know where it's set and it just seems to be, kind of a little weird. Maybe I'll go back to it, but I don't see it really being additive at this point, because it seems like, from what I'm hearing about Alan Wake 2, that kind of fills in the similar gaps to what these episodes are kind of informing you about, aside from maybe characters like you said, the Shadow Alan Wake was
Scratch,
or
yeah. Mr. Scratch, who's I mean, he was the primary antagonist of American Nightmare, but he's kind of they give more context to him in the two DLCs. The one thing I'll say is, one of the DLCs for Alan Wake 1, there's a bit where you're shining your flashlight at words, and like pages from your book are attacking you like ravens.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I was like, wow, this is so weird. I kind of loved it.
That's in the ending too. That ending, that finale was actually incredible. I found it really, once you actually got to that shadow world, or whatever you call it, the dark place, I think. The just how they were playing with perception and what reality kind of looks like. Like you said, so you're kind of finding your way back to this cabin to rescue your wife. As you're walking through this shadow realm, instead of actual like objects inhabiting the world, it's just words, like literal words just hovering around you, and you shine your light at them, and if you keep your flashlight on it for long enough, the object that the word is standing, like you're shining word at like crate, and you shine light on the word crate, and all of a sudden a crate pops up, then a lamp post and a phone book, or not phone book, but phone booth pops up, and it's very kind of goofy, but man, it was like really compelling in the moment, and I think really helps nail down the whole meta commentary, meta narrative that they were going for the entire time, and honestly sets up what they do with their games going forward, because it's something I really hadn't seen before, of actually like playing with that kind of abstraction in a game that is otherwise being presented, at least aesthetically, as very realistic, very grounded. Normally when you're playing a narrative-based video game, they really lean into the capital R realism of it, and this game has no problem of just shedding that. That escalates as you go throughout the game, and culminating in, like you said, that sort of final scene, which made the actual ending a bit more of a head-scratcher for me. It's just kind of like, okay, so that's...
Well, and
that's it.
I don't know what the progression was. I do think that when they finished Alan Wake, they actually started work on what they called Alan Wake 2, and then I think maybe that kind of hit the skids, and they went and made Alan Wake American Nightmare as kind of more of an action,
right?
An action whatever game, a Gaiden, if anything. And maybe they were going to continue working on it, but then they got distracted with other stuff.
I don't know how well Alan Wake actually did. I don't think it did gangbusters. It was more of a cult classic than anything else. And then I know general perception of American Nightmare was pretty positive, but it did kind of Remedy kind of hit a string of clunkers going forward. I know Quantum Break really soured their public perception quite a bit, to the point where, like, I don't know if Remedy is going to get out of this. And but with Control, they really turn things around. It's very much you take out of the game what you want, in a sense. They're not giving you any answers. In that sense, it reminds me a lot of, the discourse around Twin Peaks, not to come back to Lynch. But overall, I think it was an enjoyable experience, and like I said, I'm glad I played it. The only thing I actually genuinely hated in the game, and it took me a little too long to figure out what to do in the case, was the possessed objects. Like, I'm just walking through, I'm fighting shadow people, then all of a sudden, a wire spool is flying at me. I'm like, what are you doing? And you're just walking across a bridge, and all of a sudden you've got crates and you've got tractors flying at you. I'm like, I don't have time to deal with flying shit. I'm dealing with shadow people and limited ammunition and very limited mobility. But I did find it, and again, in hindsight more than anything else, comical and really cool. Like, one of the big bosses you fight in the game is a possessed, like, tractor. And in that case, the only way to beat it is to shine a light at it, which kind of speaks to what I kind of wanted the game to be.
The tractor really did it for you, is what you're saying.
Right. What I learned is, like, just keep your inventory of flashbangs loaded up. You just lob that shit at those things and you're good to go. They go away real quick. But man, you could tell when you're coming into one of those scenes where you're going to have to be dodging possessed objects, as they called them, because you can see the pile of shit in front of you up head on the screen. You're like, oh, this is going to be a problem. Because it's just loaded with crates and derelict cars and wire spools for no reason, and they all start wobbling and just bouncing around the screen at you. I'm glad I don't have to play that part again. Those parts again. Yeah,
what I will say is kind of like an end to this is what I like is Alan Wake and Alan Wake 2 kind of continue this trend of weird video games that work. I mentioned the original Silent Hill, which when it came out was weird, probably more because they didn't really finish what they had originally started with.
Right.
But that became its own kind of cult classic. And, and there's other games when you go along, like Eternal Darkness on the Nintendo GameCube, which was weird but a lot of fun. There's something about those kind of, and I think what upsets me is when I see games that look like they're going to do that kind of weird, and then they end up just being like a shoot guns, like survival horror in the most just violent shoot zombies way, rather than in the shit is weird. And so I'm glad. I do hope that we get to see more of these that are successful. this genre of strange. It's not just about unloading as many bullets into the monster as you can. Not that I don't enjoy Resident Evil now and again, but sometimes you're like, all right, how many times can I kill the nemesis with my rocket launcher?
What we need is that every Resident Evil needs a Barry. A Barry who wraps himself in Christmas lights and a headlamp that he stole from RAI and is like, I'm safe. Oh, what a goofy game, man. It's pretty fun. Quotes around fun. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topic we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page of this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, specifically the places that Andrew and I frequent, which means you can find me on Instagram at dbethelcomics, and you can find Andrew on Mastodon at profounddark at dice.camp.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube, or you might already be there. And if you are, please like and subscribe, or as the kids like to say, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disc of Medusae, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you'd like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric helps spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. Andrew, I have some corrections.
Okay.
We got some really angry fan mail because I misspoke and you misspoke, and it's a fandom that I don't want to make upset because they are very passionate and very dangerous. We talked a bit about Highlander in the outro last time.
Okay.
I was talking about the reboot that's kind of getting into production. I kept saying it was being made by Legendary Entertainment. I was wrong. It's Lionsgate. That's my bad, and I apologize. You made a faux pas that entire country got real upset about. You kept saying that Christophe Lambert is French Canadian. He is not. He was born in New York to a French diplomat. He was raised in France and Switzerland. Never set foot, except for maybe press events, into French Canada.
Why did I always think he was French Canadian?
Because he's that good.
Is that what we're saying now?
And so we apologize, and we will do our best to not make those mistakes again. Yeah, he grew up between actual France, Switzerland, and Geneva.
No, it's good. Who does want to live forever?
I feel like I should just reference a different song from the soundtrack. So until you are born to be a king, or queen, or perhaps even a prince of the universe, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I love recording a bunch of stuff we're never going to put in the
it's good. It's good. It's what it's for. All right.
I really do love all those ladies. I was the new girl.
Oh, that's good.
And
did they ever find out that you're a boy?
Nope.
All right. Well, your secret's safe with this podcast, friend.
Indeed. Let's talk about some Alan Wake.
Didn't we just do that last week?
Yeah, but now I'm done, and that's what matters.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you can make a joke about autoerotic asphyxiation. Everyone loves that.
Everybody loves